Welcome to Expert Profiles Atlanta, where Atlanta's influencers and innovators share strategies for overcoming obstacles and achieving success in business and life. Here's your host, best-selling author and Atlanta influencer, Neil Howe.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today my special guest is Brian Green from By Brian Green LLC. He is the chief architect and creative visionary, and he's based in Atlanta and Crown Events Inc. in Barbados. Brian is an award-winning event planner with over 16 years of experience in the international events industry. JEZEBEL Magazine voted Brian the best wedding planner in Atlanta in 2010, again in 2015 and 2016, and he has also been recognized as a Hall of Fame recipient for Best of the Knot. He was a regular invited talent offering advice on Women's Entertainment Network's Get Married for 2 seasons, and he's been featured in many luxury magazines. Talking about all he does. So let's find out exactly what he does. Welcome to the show, Brian Green.
Thank you so much, Neil. How are you?
I am doing great. Thanks very much. Well, let's talk a little bit about you and your business, and ultimately, who do you help? What clients are you helping?
Yeah, so for our business, because it does span a lot of event planning companies, kind of either focus on corporate or social, but we actually do a mixture of the bit. I grew up with a grandmother who always said, never put all of your eggs in one basket. So we believe in that policy. So on the social side of things, which is predominantly for us luxury weddings, the client that is probably the most ideal client, your dream client that fits into your core of who your business and what your business is, for us is they actually have a name. If it's a girl, we've named her Stephanie. If it's a guy, he's Bradley, just to kind of give them some personality. But 28 to 45, they're usually college educated. They're definitely working professionals. They've left university and studying for a while. They've been in the world of work. So that means for us that they are people who've been out in the world, who've been enjoying a good life. They love dining out. They do travel. They look for luxury experiences. And they have a really clear vision of who they are and what they like or don't like. They're not necessarily the person that has dreamed of their wedding since they were 6 years old, but they're open to really kind of creative processes and trusting their experts that they've hired along the way. And then for us on the corporate side, it's really an organization or a corporation that isn't looking to do the same old over and over again. You know, we go into the room and the screens are the same place, and we do the same thing and we do it in the same way. It's not really necessarily generating a solid goal achievement for our corporate clients. So we really work with companies that want to do things differently, that want to kind of grab their attendees' attention, that want to look at things that do hit the goals better, that offer interesting new ways of doing things that can create retention, more customer activation, so that we're really kind of purpose-driven on our corporate side.
Well, I love businesses that have an avatar, that really have figured out who their ideal client is. It makes things so much easier. Your clients know that you know everything about them. You have their best interests, and you know exactly who you're looking for as well. So you're not spreading yourself thin. I love companies that really know that avatar. Now, tell me a little bit about, you are also in Barbados, which sounds like that is where you're from.
It is.
How did you get started in wedding planning and event planning?
So for us, actually, well, the company kind of grew out of, just going to take you back. I grew up in Barbados. I got to study hospitality management in Barbados, and then I also was very fortunate to have an amazing boss at my hotel that sent me off to Cornell to do additional work and studying at their Statler Hall to kind of really get the stuff organized and figure out what I was doing. And from hotel industry, I actually became a diplomat for Barbados and was based at our consulate in Miami, and my responsibility initially was tourism. And part of that process really is creating events and experiences for potential customers to visit Barbados. And as I was kind of creating these experiences, I had said to my then boss, I think we can do this better if you will pay for me to do my designations and certifications. I think I can turn this into something that really is a win-win for all of us. And they did. And promptly right after that, about a year and a half after, I started my own business. I kind of wanted to really move into doing things that were a lot more fun, a lot more creative. It was 2008, and no one said to me that you shouldn't start a business in an economic downturn. So I kind of went into it with the attitude that it would succeed. And initially, it was really kind of focused on doing more of what I was used to, the government element side of it. But one thing that we really quickly discovered is that luxury really isn't affected by the economy one way or the other. And we quickly shifted our business proposition to looking at luxury social events. And that kind of was the backbone of how we started.
That's right. If there were anybody that wasn't affected by the 2008, 2009 crash, it was the ones that can afford these luxury events. So that was definitely a great decision to deal with them only. So talk to me about what it takes to put on a luxury event and what these people are looking for.
Yeah. So for me, I always when I speak at conferences and stuff, I always say luxury is not necessarily a price point; it's an experience. So for us, while our client is spending a great deal of money, it's really about that bespoke experience. No two of our social events ever looks alike, and simply because no two of our clients are alike. And I tell every client that the difference between you've gone to a nice wedding, we've all been to a very nice wedding, but nothing really stands out. And then we've all been to that great wedding that you're still talking about 10 years later. The difference between those two events really was the customization, the personalization, that everything about the experience really spoke to the couple that you were celebrating and that you felt them through every piece of it. And that's really what we focused on. So for us, it's actually, it was coined by actually a peer of mine with another event industry business. And she said to me, what you guys really do is the best friend experience. And it really is that. We take our clients to lunch and we have champagne and talk about silly things. And we go have mani-pedis together and we create an experience where we get to know our client so well organically that what we're creating can only be for them. And that's really the difference between the luxury experience and a very generic, basic experience for us.
Right. And so much of that is true across the board as well, whether it's, in the wedding planning or event planning industry or any other industry. It's about creating that experience. And that's really what people are looking for. So
Absolutely.
Tell me about the different kinds of events that you put on. Obviously, weddings are a huge business. There's always going to be weddings. But what other kind of events do you put on?
Yeah, definitely. This November, we're working on an award show that will be super exciting. In Barbados, we actually create a television broadcast for the Miss Universe Barbados pageant, which is one of the most awesome things possible. It was one of those weird things when someone said, "Have you done a television production?" And I said, "Well, no, but technically everything we do, all you needed to do was stick a camera in it so we can do this." And we started doing it 2 years ago, and that's really been remarkable. From small conferences, we do corporate CEO retreats and getaways. We pretty much kind of run the gamut on the corporate side. And then on the social side, it is predominantly for us weddings, just because of our pricing structure, and not necessarily smaller events like a birthday shower and stuff like that.
Mm. So you've been on TV yourself, both on the WE Network and Steve Harvey as well, I believe.
Yes.
Tell me how these kinds of things come about. How do you become the one who's selected to give your advice on television?
So that was a very purpose-driven, both of those things were a very purpose-driven part of our business plan. One of the things that I knew kind of coming into creating the brand and moving initially from Miami to Atlanta was kind of establishing that we were going to be the go-to team and we were going to be the experts in our craft. There are a lot of people in this industry in particular come into it from a love of just wanting to create something magical and beautiful for people, and that's great. But our differentiator is that we are trained and qualified as event professionals with our designations. So there was that difference immediately of, I know how to manage your budget, I know how to manage your expectations, we know the right people and we can make that happen. And part of that plan was, in order to do that, we needed to kind of have a full media experience. And the first thing on WeTV literally came out because I was at an event and some of the producers from the show were there. And we were just I made my way over, introduced myself, and we were just laughing and talking, and I was my actual normal self. And they were like, "You're crazy and you're amazing. You should come by the studio and we'll get you to do some on-air Q&As. And that kind of took off. And then they just kind of kept calling me every week to come back and do additional things, which was superb until the show ended. And then Steve Harvey really was just an amazing opportunity. I had shot a pilot for NBC for a television show the year prior that kind of worked its way up the ladder, and you learn very quickly. It's a lot of 2 steps forward and 16 steps back in the process. And while it was kind of working its way through, the executive producer of what would have been that show was also the EP for Steve Harvey. And I had said to her, if you ever need someone, and she was like, that is a really great idea. And then literally last year, she's like, so we're doing a wedding hour on Steve's show, and he loves the reel that we showed him of you. We need you next week. And I was like, I am on my way. And actually, next week, I'm heading out to LA to meet with her again to talk about some more opportunities.
That is excellent. And, those are opportunities, obviously, that you cannot pass up. You don't turn them down.
Absolutely.
So tell me, what has that kind of stuff done for you? How does that help with your business? How has it attracted the kinds of clients that you've wanted?
I mean, definitely, the more eyes that you can get on your business that say that you are the expert, that you're the one to go to, that you know what you're doing. But it's also a very concerted, obviously, part of that process is, for us, our clients who have been through the process really are the greatest salespeople that I could possibly have. I have one client that we did her wedding 6 years ago. She is subsequently, unfortunately, divorced, but she has probably sent us like 15 clients in the process because she loved the experience so much. So that's kind of the great thing. And of course, in this new era of social media and eyes, every time the Steve Harvey Show posts, a clip from the wedding hour or whatever we did, we can see an influx of people kind of hitting the website and looking at stuff, and I'll see leads generating more. So definitely, and it's a lot of stuff that any business that's in any kind of market can do. Media is always looking for an expert. They're always looking for information. They're always looking for things to fill. There are great things out there like Help a Reporter Out that we do quite a lot. Your local TV station and whatever market you're in is always, especially if you're an event planner, there's always an Easter story. There's always a Mother's Day. There's always a Valentine's. You can reach out and say, hey, we'd love to do a segment with you. Pitch them your idea. They're looking for content and you're the owners of content.
That's right. They are always looking for content. That's definitely something that I share with people all the time as well. Now, what about some of the misconceptions about the wedding and event industry? I'm guessing that most people that are your ideal clientele don't try and put it on themselves, but what other mistakes do you see them make?
I think, definitely our client is not the DIYer trying to, kind of jerry rig a massive event. You're not going to take a wedding with, 60, 70, 100, $200,000 and try to figure it out on your own. You are going to hire a professional.
Right.
But I do see a lot of people, which is always fascinating to me. There is a very weird blurred line between your event professionals and clients. So there's always that weird misconception that, you get the random odd person who's not really your core client. That will assume that you really are just a personal assistant to run and get things for them whenever they just kind of point at it, which is really not what, as your event professional, we're here to do. And then also that kind of weird thing where we're working together. I am indeed hired to help create this amazing experience for you, but I'm not your employee. I'm your consultant, and we kind of work in collaboration. And it's always that kind of interesting line that I just had this conversation at a conference I spoke at with a young planner who was saying to me that she was having this challenge. And I said, well, part of that process is establishing your experience up front so that your client knows to trust you. Those things will happen if they don't feel like you've got everything under control.
Right. You really have to establish that authority, and this is your expertise.
Exactly.
Exactly what you do. So you're going to know better than them, what needs to be done, which is very, very important. Now, you mentioned price, when somebody's spending tens of thousands of dollars on an event that, it is about that experience, but do you find price still an issue at that level too?
I think what I jokingly say all the time that some of the social media apps are as helpful as they are unhelpful. There is always, unfortunately, we just did an incredible wedding a couple weeks ago here at the St. Regis in Atlanta for a pro athlete that was beyond spectacular, and a budget that was really, really incredible. And we were happy to have it to be able to create the experience that they wanted. But unfortunately, not always are people able to translate what they see on social media to a real budget in a real world. And I tell people all the time, $20,000 in the real world is an awful lot of money. $20,000 for 200 people for an experience that you want to have, flowers dripping everywhere, and Cirque du Soleil show up and do an amazing performance is not. So it's really about kind of creating a perspective that you understand what your money can do and how it can stretch. And while we might look at that wedding as a great inspiration piece, that's not the wedding that your budget will necessarily get you towards, but we can still be inspired by it to create something that works within your financial plan.
So what kind of clientele? I'm sure you've done many famous weddings. What kind of people have you worked with in the past?
We work with everyone. I mean, we've teachers, we've done teachers, I've had a fireman, we've had pro athletes. We did a wedding for an amazing Olympic bronze medalist a couple years ago, 2 years ago. It really runs the gamut. I think our client isn't necessarily somebody that's just dripping with money and nothing to do with it. Our client is really someone who wants to have that luxury experience. And our task is really kind of taking their financial plan and crafting it into a way that looks amazing and that it even looks grander than what their budget was.
So what is next for by Brian Green? And, what do you have planned in the upcoming months and years?
So next up is I'm actually in the process right now of working on my first book. It is becoming a labor. I'm not even going to add the word of love on the back end. It's just becoming a labor that we're kind of working through the process. But I feel like that is the next important thing. And then the 5-year goal actually is a little bit more of a pinky in the brain world domination plan. I really want to move towards home entertainment, living and experiences that people can go into their local big box store and buy and bring home and create wonderful events. people come to weddings and corporate events and galas all the time, and they love it, and the experience is amazing. And then they have a party at home, and they're not quite sure how that all comes together. And we want to be able to create, this is what you can go get. This is a beautiful tabletop. Here's a gorgeous linen. Here's the things that you can create your own experience like that in your home for your family and friends. So that's kind of a long-term goal.
Well, that's certainly a good goal, being able to, hit all across the country and all across the world if you get your name out there, like you're certainly seeming to do right now with all these TV shows and the book coming out as well. So tell me, Brian, what should somebody be looking for specifically if they're looking for an event planner to do a luxury wedding? What are the important questions to ask?
So definitely, I think one of the first things is, do you actually like this person? Your event planner is probably the person you're spending the absolute most time with. So do they get you? Do they understand your vision or how you function? Do you actually like them? There's no point hiring someone because you think they're the best and you cannot stand being around them. It is the worst experience that you could possibly ask for yourself. But you want to be able to also ask things like, what have you done in the past? Do you have a portfolio that we can look at? Are there former clients that would be happy to share their experience with us? What is your vision and how do you run? How many people do you have on your team on the given day? What is the experience like? And how do you manage to process from today till the very end when the final dance happens? Those are things that are very important to ask. Do they have vendors that you can pull at for every category? And also the other question you want to ask is if they are willing to work with vendors that you love from previous experiences. Because there are some planners who also will not work with other vendors outside of their preferred list. We, for example, we will. Our only requirement is that it's not your auntie who bakes cakes or your uncle who's a photographer. It has to be a professional business with a business license and business insurance. And they have to create a contract because everyone needs to be held accountable from a legal perspective. So those are the things that you're very key that you want to ask. And in a corporate aspect of it, you want to be sure that the team understands your corporate culture and your goals and what you're trying to accomplish with the event.
Well, that's certainly very good questions to ask somebody, making sure that you are getting the right person. Now, tell me, Brian, what is one lesson that you learned early on in your career in this business that still impacts how you do business today?
The early lesson was not taking a client that's not your core client. It is something I remind myself and my team of constantly. And it's why we kind of created the avatar of who our client is, because ultimately what you end up doing when you're not working with your core client is you are really creating a very difficult experience, because it's really not the client's fault. It really is your fault, because you did have the option to say, we are not the best fit, and perhaps you should work with A, B, or C instead. But you took it because of whatever reasons. We live in the real world, and your power bill is due, and your mortgage is always due, and here's a client, and you need to do that. But we learned early on that was not something that we could sustain, because for us, this process is, we give so much of ourselves, from designing what the event looks like to putting our hours into it. We could not work in an environment where we were not working with our core client who really appreciated and valued what we do.
And that is so important, that you are appreciated, because you do have a certain skill set that is needed, and you do need to work with the people that appreciate the time and effort and everything that you've put into developing that talent. Now, let's talk about the fears for a minute that some clients might have in the back of their mind about pulling an extravagant event together. What do you see that they are a little bit worried about?
I think, one thing that people obviously always are concerned about is kind of the budget. I don't care who you are, what your financial resources are. We all put a budget in place. Can your team manage your budget effectively? And I always tell my clients, my job is to manage your budget, but my job is not to manage your finances. And by that, what I mean is, if you've given me a specific number that is your budget, as we're kind of going through the process before we meet each vendor, I have already told those vendors kind of what the budget range is so that they know. Just going to use an example, this person wants to buy a Mazda. I'm not taking them to Land Rover. Like, that's just doesn't make sense. There's no point taking a client well beyond something that is not in their budget comfort zone that then they really desire and they can't have. It just doesn't make any sense. But if in the process we are there and the experience is growing and they're like, oh, can I have and can I add? I will always say to them, we're stepping over budget bounds, but I'm going to let the vendor make sure that he sends it or she sends it to you so you can make that decision on the back end. Because ultimately what you don't want is to get to the end of your event, corporate or social, and say, oh, I wish I had done, because we can't redo it. So I'd rather you said to me, oh, I really want to hang that elephant upside down and paint it pink and put flowers all over it. And I say to you, well, that's another 10 grand. And you say, you know what, I can do it. It's fine. Or no, I'm really good. I'll think about it maybe later on. And that's fine. But I'm always going to be, and I think people have that concern that the budget's going to get away from them. But if you have a team that's really focused on what your goals are, then you'll be okay every time.
And it does take a team as well. You've got to do so many things. You've got to look at the finances, the figures, the budgets. You've got to manage people. You've got to lead different vendors to do different things. I don't know how you get it all done. You must have a good system in place to do all that.
We do. Everyone, my team laughs and says that I'm super, super anal, but I am. The timeline that goes out to our vendors is 22 pages long on the average, and covers everything from where vendors are supposed to park to the nearest hospital in case there's an emergency, to how the table diagram is laid out, to the floor plans, to every single detail. And I think a lot of that comes from when I was part of the diplomatic corps. Everything in government is always in triplicate. And I literally used to work towards the process of, if I can have as few questions asked back of me, that would be a good day. So I just kind of approach all of our social and corporate events the same way now. It's an overabundance of information so that everybody is aware how they will succeed.
Well, it certainly takes a certain person to be able to pull all that kind of stuff together and put on a nice luxury event, whether it is a corporate event or a wedding or a party or whatever it might be. Now, Brian, if people want to get in touch with you and your company and find out more and talk to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Absolutely. They can always email us at hello@bybriangreen.com. Or they can follow us on social media. Of course, Instagram and Twitter, we're @bybriangreen. And then on Facebook, it's Facebook.com/bybriangreen. So we're really easy to find.
Well, Brian, I really enjoyed talking to you today. It's been a very content-rich interview. You've given us lots of things to think about, lots of questions to ask if we're looking to put on an event. So thank you very much for being my guest on Expert Profiles Atlanta today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Neil. Have a great day.
And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
Thank you for listening to Expert Profiles Atlanta with Neil Howe. To learn more about the resources in the show or to listen to past episodes, visit expertprofilesatlanta.com.